Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home.
Hello, Karen.
Hey, Dan.
How's everything going your way?
It is crazy. Yeah,
It's been so busy.
it is crazy.
Summertime, planting, work,
Camps.
radio.
Yeah, so being county agents, we do a lot more than just this radio show, although it would be a lot easier if this was all we did. But,
Yeah.
it's fun.
And it still wouldn't be easy.
No, that's true. There's so much we could talk about and so many things to know.
Yeah.
And so we also know that's hard on farms too, right? You have to know everything and it becomes a challenge.
That's right. And every year is a little different. Sometimes a lot different. It's and there's just always something to know, to learn. It doesn't even have to be a new pest per se, but it could just be something that's never been an issue until like 10 years later, and there's so many examples. Anyway, how fun? How fun is this, right?
Well, I mean, that's one of the great things, though, is for people who do love to learn, there's always something else to learn. And so that's an inspiring thing for all of our farmers, just their willingness and eagerness to experiment, try new things, learn new things, all to make sure that they can bring a good, healthy product to someone else's table. And, that's quite a commitment.
I think the concept of the old time farmer that's set in his ways and does things the way their parents did it and their grandparents did it. I don't think they realize how much they actually evolve and adapt, because climate's not consistent, pests aren't consistent, technology changes, people get new tractors, and sometimes it's not as obvious to them. And as much as they resist change, they're adapting. And a lot of times we have to repeat things to understand them, to get better at them, even to adapt with the changing times. Just some of the repeated concepts really help.
This is true. Yeah. And it's a challenge because you're like, oh, this thing that I thought I knew, I'm actually wrong about. And so you have to go back and, like, oh my gosh, how many people did I tell this wrong thing to? And you just have to accept that, yeah, sometimes we're wrong and you learn as you go forward and you make changes and you correct problems and you keep going. So it's absolutely impossible for one person to know absolutely everything, and that's why we're always on this journey of learning new things, trying new things, and we all make mistakes, and that is part of agriculture and it's part of natural resources. You make mistakes, you learn what you did wrong, and you fix that mistake and move forward. And so don't beat yourself up for not knowing something or not doing something that you now know is the right way to do it. It's all a learning process, and we need to accept that it's impossible to be perfect, right?
And today we are going to learn and relearn a concept that many of our beef producers out there are familiar with. And it's always good to learn and relearn it because that's how you get better. But we thought we'd delve into the concepts of beef quality assurance, considering we're kind of in this post calving season, and beef quality assurance is a program to ensure that beef and dairy cattle are maintained in a manner which will result in a safe and wholesome beef product for the consumer. As farmers, as the producers of food, fiber, and fuels, we do want to make a safe food product for consumers. And Beef Quality Assurance is a program designed by the Beef Checkoff. It's a federal program that will allow a certification of beef producers in all aspects of the chain. So, when you think about putting a good, safe, wholesome beef product in the market, you're talking about packers, seed stock, cow calf, and dairy producers, right? Because, meat comes from dairy operations as well.
Yes, it does.
Stockers, feeders, truckers, the people moving the calf from usually the east side to the west side of the United States. They're responsible to make sure that product is safe, it's wholesome, and once it is harvested, it becomes a really good product and a safe product for consumers.
Right. And the Beef Quality Assurance Program is not a regulatory program. It's not something that the USDA said farmers have to do. It's something that farmers, producers, and processors got together and said, what can we do to make our cattle healthier and get through the process more easily to create a system of sensible management practices to strengthen consumer confidence in beef products, but also to ensure food safety and keeping good records so that we know how the animals were handled and being able to have that backing to say, hey, I do everything I can to take good care of these animals.
That's right. So the Beef Quality Assurance Program really focuses on residues, pathogen contamination, carcass defects. And it's one of those programs that have evolved with consumer preference. And if you examine consumer preference in the early 90s and compare it to current times, at least in the past 10 years, what you'll find is a shift in thinking and a shift in what a quality product is. Early in the 90s, a lot of the consumers were really focused on things like external fat of the meat, seam fat, overall palatability, tenderness, the cutability, the marbling. And most consumers now, and at least in the past 10 years, the trends have gone to food safety, eating satisfaction, right? Because we all love to eat a good product. So that really hasn't changed. Lean fat and bone, weight and size. But here's the other, that kind of the newer trends that are out there: how and where cattle were raised, visual characteristics, and also how those animals were handled. The quality of not just your food, not just that beef product in front of you, but also as far as, that the life that it took that piece of meat to reach your plate. What was the background there? Were the animals treated right? Were they healthy? So consumer preferences have kind of shifted there, and consumers will oftentimes pay for what they prefer. It's not all about the price of food anymore. It's almost like a peace of mind knowing certain things about the food you eat. And beef quality assurance is just another way to kind of satisfy that peace of mind aspect for a consumer eating a product, in this case beef specifically.
Right. And also, we have found as we have been doing these beef quality assurance trainings throughout the country, now not us specifically, but extension and educators as a whole, but what farmers have found is that these techniques actually make their own lives easier. The calm handling techniques and making sure you have better quality handling facilities. So, not only do you protect the cattle from injury, but they go through it more smoothly, more quickly, and you're less likely to get hurt while you're running the animals through these different facilities. And so, it's not just about the consumer who wants to make sure that they have a happy cow on their plate. That's important too, but it's more than that. It's about improving the safety and quality of life for the animal and for the farmer.
That's right. And the food safety aspect is right in there,
Oh,
because
yeah.
when you're looking at keeping lame animals out of the market, cancer eyes, another one, downer animals, lumpy jaw, just a sick animal should never be harvested for food. And I did kind of say that in passing, but knowing when to market your animals it's a very important thing, so that things don't progress to something that's painful for the animal and then it's of negative for the food product. So just keeping an eye on your animals knowing what's going on with your animals, making sure that you take care of smaller issues quickly is a very important thing.
Right.
But also, and as far as food safety goes and the quality of the animal, we think about just sanitation. One of the dirtiest parts of an animal is the hide. So if you have an animal that's just mucking through mud, caked in mud and manure, you got to remember that the hide is just a very good medium for E. coli and salmonella. And that in turn can cause infections that then could eventually lead to more expense on the farmer side, more suffering on the animal side. So sanitation is a really important aspect of it too. So just keeping things clean, making sure your animals aren't just trudging through the mud all the time and have caked mud on them all the time is very important.
Yeah, and plus that's going to cause your animal to burn more calories to move around. It's especially an issue in the wintertime when we don't have a good freeze and we have this wet, cold soil that nothing's growing in because it's winter. And the animals, the more they walk in that soil, the more they sink into it. And that's usually when we have these problems of mud getting caked up onto the coats of these animals. And you don't want to spray them off in the wintertime because that's going to further decrease their body temperature. So rotating pastures, trying to keep them out of muddy situations, keeping them out of stream beds, all of those things can help to improve not only the health of the animal, but also the food safety aspects of the meat.
And here are some numbers for you. I pulled them up. When we're talking about mud, right, there is that sanitation, there is that pathogen component to it, but there's also the loss of gain component. So it's a direct impact on how that animal gains. So if you're looking at percentage loss of gains, right? So imagine no mud at all would be 0%. And depending on the quality of your feed, you're getting the reciprocal gain on your animal. If you have just a little bit of mud up to the Duke law, imagine a 7% loss of gain. So that means 7% of the feed you're giving it is just not going to be retained in that animal. Shin deep, 14%. Below the hock, 21%. We start getting really deep and we're talking about the entire hock being in the mud, 28%. And if it starts getting in their bellies up to that height, I mean, sometimes I would wonder how an animal can get out of a certain situation, but we're talking about belly deep mud. Basically, over a third of all the feed you're giving it is just going to waste, and it's expensive. It makes it so that your animals are going to be less valuable. They're going to gain less, and the quality of that meat, the quality of that animal, is just going to be low. So you're throwing away money in various forms just by having mud around.
This is true. And, you also think about when that mud gets on their feed. You could have botulism, blackleg, malignant edema, listeria. You could have Clostridium, and all of those make your animals sick as well as decreasing the amount of intake because they don't like eating muddy hay. And so you again, just by doing one thing, by keeping the mud down, you are protecting the health of your animal, protecting the rate of gain, and providing a better product to market
Right.
and more of it, right?
And more of it, absolutely. But also, one of the things that Karen you touched on earlier was the behavior of the animal,
Hmm.
right? We all know in our lives that stress impacts us in a negative way.
Truth.
Well, especially if it's prolonged stress, long-term stress,
Hmm.
and that can cause physiological issues in our body. That also happens on the cow calf side. Cattle have innate behaviors. They have experiences that they learn in your farm and that conditions them as well. And they have sensory perceptions that are just the way they're built. Knowing what some of these are is really going to provide you a good way to handle your animals so that you're not negatively impacting them in that way. So a lot of times we like to say you got to think like cattle when you are handling cattle. So, cattle aren't the smartest creatures. I hope I didn't offend anyone, but they're not the smartest creatures out there. So they only think about one thing at a time. So if you want them, as an example, to get in the corral, go through the alleyway, and go to the chute, you can't be at the chute. You have to move them in a calm fashion to a corral, then maybe an alleyway, and then worry about getting them into the chute. The cow can't process multiple steps like that. And a lot of times people probably can't process multiple things at the same time. So so you have to do one thing at a time. Other things that cow like is they like seeing you. They've developed a relationship with you. You put other people around, and that can confuse them. They also want to go around you. They don't necessarily want to go through you. So if you're trying to get them to move behind you, you have to get out of the way.
Right. I mean, you have to recognize what cattle are. They're A, herd animals, and B, they're prey animals. That's why they have eyes on the side of their head so they can watch all around them for potential predators. And so they're very influenced by what the lead cow is doing. And if you get the lead cow to do what you want it to do, then the rest of them will just wander on behind it. So understanding the flight zones of cattle and being able to just put a small movement in that flight zone to cause the animal to go forward. And where you are next to the cattle, there's a point of balance where if you're in front of it, the cattle's going to stop. And if you're behind it, the cattle's going to move forward. And recognizing how to use that system of moving cattle around can significantly reduce the stress that the animals are under. And that's really good for a couple different reasons. A, you don't have to deal with aggressive or excited cattle, which are very big and can hurt you by accident very easily. It also, when you're giving vaccinations, a calm cow is going to react better to the vaccination, and you're going to have more vaccination success when you have calm, happy cattle. When you have a lot of stress hormones running through the body, that actually causes the body to fight against whatever it is that you're trying to give it to make it healthier, right? And so it's important to make sure that your animals are in a calm state when you're running them through the chute to give them their vaccinations, because that's going to improve the outcome, right?
And one of the points that you said, that cows, like, they're herd animals, right? So let's say you are in a situation where you want to vaccinate one animal. And if you look at the beef quality assurance standards, one of the recommendations is, since cattle like to be in herds, move two other ones with it, or at least one other one. Bring two or three
Hmm.
into the working facility,
Yeah, even if you're only working on the one.
only to vaccinate the one. What does that do? That keeps that stress level low, like Karen was saying. It allows that vaccine to work better. And you've kept that animal calm. It's probably easier to work that animal. And it just makes life easier both for you and for the animal. And I bet you, if you're saying, well, it's kind of a waste of time to move three cows, I bet you would actually spend less time trying to move three cows than trying to move one by itself.
Yeah, you're right. And you're
And
gonna move them faster if you're calm too, right? I mean, scared cattle are not going to act the way you want them to act. So be calm with them, avoid loud noises, avoid quick color changes. So like let's say you ran out of paint and one wall is a dark color and the next wall is a light color, that's going to cause the cattle to hesitate in that space.
mhm,
So, making sure that you're keeping things uniform and you don't allow snake-shaped streamers to be flopping around anywhere, because again, that's going to make them nervous.
right. And birds don't like it either.
So it's good to keep birds off your berries, not so good to get your cattle through a chute.
Right. And actually, so when we talk about this panoramic vision, I think it's very important to understand that the cow can see about 300 degrees all the way around it.
Hmm.
But there's obviously a small blind spot right behind the animal. So if you're there and you kind of jump out and all of a sudden you are in the flight zone, really deep in the flight zone, you're going to startle that animal. But having that panoramic vision also comes with blurriness. That animal really can't see, can't focus like we can. Obviously, we can't see 300 degrees around us. Our vision's a lot sharper. So when Karen was talking about those light contrasts, that's going to impact the animal because when everything's kind of blurry, they're not sure what they're seeing. And you have to also understand that even though a cow can see 300 degrees around it, it actually has very limited vertical vision. So we as humans have 140 degrees that we can see. So we look out in front of us and you can map out about 140 degrees from up to down. Cattle can only see 60 degrees. So what does that mean? If there's something blurry and weird in the alleyway, they're going to stop, they're going to look down. And then they're going to look back up and they're going to move again. You know what the cow behind that one's going to do? It's going to stop. It's going to look down. It's going to look up. It might back up actually, and then it might go forward again.
Or it might just stop.
Or it might not move at all. So making sure that you picked up litter, because that plastic cup that's in the alleyway or whatever, like just say you're trying to work 20 cows and all of them are stopping and hesitating and moving backwards all the time. Think about how much time you wasted when all you had to do was look at the facility and pick up a plastic cup.
Yeah, and, think about other things that you could have had a balloon that floated in from who knows where, that some child lost at some festival and just sort of landed in your facility. Always do a pre-walkthrough to make sure that there's no litter or distracting things. Make sure there's no nails or screws sticking out that the animal could bump into and get injured. You wanna make sure that you're bringing your animals into a safe and calm facility. Look for light changes too, and maybe just adding a little bit of a spotlight to a dark corner can help to calm the animals and make them feel more comfortable.
That's right. Cows don't like to walk in dark places. So if you want a cow to move a certain way, put a spotlight up. Like a lot of people I've seen at the end of a shoot, at the end of a working shoot, will put a light out so that the cow will move that way after it's done. So it's not trying to move backwards, or put the light on the chute itself so that the cow or that animal is more likely to come in. And when you're handling these animals, like handling tools, let's say, try not to have something that's blunt, that if you're trying to get the animal's attention, that you're not actually bruising the animal. There's a professor at Ohio State who likes to work with his hat
Hmm.
because the hat can't do a lot of damage. It is big, it's flashy, it's attention getting, but it's not a stick or a rod that you are hitting the animal with. And a lot of times, the smaller the object is, the more pressure you're putting in a smaller area, causing possible bruising. So if you're moving that animal from your facility, let's say it's a finished animal and it's going to the slaughterhouse, and let's say it was a very stressful day, the cows weren't moving because there was a cup in the alleyway, and you're behind schedule, so you're trying to get them to move and you are working them very hard and you're stressed. Well, you could have bruised a lot of very valuable meat just by not thinking ahead and just doing a quick glance and a quick check before you started handling those animals. So think about these things. If the animal's doing what it's supposed to do, leave it alone. There's no need to keep pressuring things into going faster and faster and faster. You're much better off leaving the animal alone if the animal is doing what it should. Because if you're looking at the difference between low stress handling and a high stress handling, there's a lot of changes. Like you will have more lactate build up in the muscles in high stress. You'll have an increased heart rate. You'll have increased temperature. You'll have pH changes in the blood. And if that animal's in those states for a prolonged period of time, that can really affect the quality of the meat. And, that next stop that your animal is going to, they're going to be like, well, these animals are pretty low quality. I'm not really interested in purchasing these from that farm anymore. And it could have just been because you were so rushed and because you stressed out the animal so much. And then it takes a few days to get from a farm in Eastern Ohio to a farm out west or to a slaughterhouse somewhere.
Yeah, and that's another really important thing to consider is if you're not transporting the animals yourself, you need to really vet your drivers and your truckers who are managing the cattle after they leave your farm. Because after purchase and processing, the buyer's going to say, well, I know this cow came from this farm. And regardless of how well you took care of it, if it got injured or stressed out on the truck, that could impact the quality of the meat at the butchering floor. And also vet your butchers. If you are a direct sale farmer and you are selling meat to your customers, vet your butcher, know how they treat the animals while they're there, because if you take excellent care of your animal and you drop it off at the butcher to be processed and they leave it out in a yard without water for 3 days before processing it, that's going to do a lot of bad things to the quality of your meat. And then your direct sale customers are going to go, wow, I don't like this meat. Or you're going to lose a lot of volume to that meat because, things have to be cut off. So it's important to vet every step of the way when you are selling your animals if your name is going to remain attached to that animal. So do keep that in mind when you are selling directly to a processing facility or selling direct to consumer. Obviously, these things are important when you're selling at an auction, but usually once it leaves the auction, it's off of you, right? So unless it's, like a disease or something like that that comes with the animal, but hopefully that's not going to be an issue. But again, the Beef Quality Assurance Program is an excellent way to just work through the basics, and especially for new farmers who are just getting into cattle, this is a really good program to just kind of walk you through what to expect. What do I need to know? What do I need to be monitoring? What do I need to be setting up for? And it can help you to prevent a problem that you can't fix after the fact.
Or it'll keep you from starting bad habits.
Hey, there's the best one right there. That's the best time to stop a bad habit is before it starts.
That's right. And there's a lot of them. And, we say these things and you're like, yeah, it's obvious, but you see it. And sometimes it's just because it's become a bad habit or people are just impatient, but you got to remember to think like that animal and really just try to put yourself in their place as far as, is this what I know what to do if I was in that place? Try to think like the animal. Try not to stress them when handling. Sanitation is very important. Make sure you're following labels. Make sure you have a good relationship with your vet. But that Beef Quality Assurance Program is out there for not only beginning farmers, but also the more experienced farmers as well.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.